And he has told her before, I'm going to get your ass and nobody's ever going to find you.
What's your concern?
That he killed her.
This is David Callaghan, 53 years old. What you're about to hear isn't just disturbing, it's the kind of story that leaves a quiet neighborhood permanently marked by something no one saw coming. Behind an ordinary home in Akron, Ohio, beneath a patch of earth that looked no different from the rest of the yard, lay a secret that would unravel a relationship, devastate a family, and expose a crime hidden in plain sight for weeks. At first glance, nothing about David Callaghan suggested that his name would one day be associated with one of the most chilling domestic killings in the city's recent memory. He was a middle-aged man living a relatively low-profile life, involved in a relationship with a woman who had built decades of memories in the very house that would later become the center of a homicide investigation. To neighbors, it was just another residence along Crouse Street. To law enforcement, it would soon become a crime scene. And to one family, it would become the place where hope ended and reality began. This case revolves around the death of 53-year-old Martha Robin Freitag, a woman described by those who knew her as independent, strong-willed, and deeply connected to her loved ones. She was not someone who simply disappeared without explanation. Yet in the late summer of 2018, that is exactly what seemed to happen. Days passed, then weeks. Phone calls went unanswered. Messages remained unopened. The silence grew heavier with each passing hour. What no one realized at the time was that the answer was already beneath their feet. In July 2018, inside Martha's Akron home, an argument escalated into violence. By the time it was over, Martha Freitag was dead. Instead of calling for help, instead of admitting what had happened, David Callaghan made a decision that would define everything that followed. He buried her body in a shallow grave behind the house, attempting to conceal the crime in the most literal way possible. Soil was turned. The ground was flattened. Life on the surface appeared to continue as normal. But disappearances create questions, and questions demand answers. When Martha's daughter reported her missing in September, investigators began interviewing acquaintances. They returned to the house, and eventually, their attention turned to the backyard.
How you doing? Is Martha here?
She's probably at her boyfriend's house.
What they discovered there would confirm suspicions and bring a grim end to the search. David Callaghan would later plead guilty to murder and related charges. He would be sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after nearly 2 decades. Yet the legal outcome, while definitive on paper, does little to erase the haunting reality of what occurred inside that home. David Callaghan had covered the evidence with deliberate precision. In the days following the fatal altercation, he returned to the backyard multiple times, shifting soil, rearranging items, flattening the surface to disguise the shallow grave beneath. Every decision he made was calculated to delay discovery. The house itself gave no outward sign of disturbance. Curtains remained drawn normally. Objects were left untouched. Outside, the neighborhood maintained its routine rhythm of lawn care, passing cars and children walking to nearby schools, unaware that beneath the ordinary exterior, the remnants of a violent death lay hidden. Investigators tracing Martha Freitag's last known activities noted that she had been seen alive just days before the fatal event. Surveillance records, phone pings, and witness statements created a fragmentary timeline. They confirmed that she had returned home in the late afternoon, engaged in ordinary domestic routines. Nothing in those hours indicated that the day would end in homicide. The argument that escalated to fatal violence occurred behind closed doors, invisible to everyone outside the property. Once the fatal encounter had concluded, Callaghan moved her body from the interior of the home into the backyard. The act itself demanded effort, a methodical orchestration of concealment. He chose a location obscured from the street by shrubs, a corner that would appear naturally secluded. The digging left subtle traces in the soil, but to anyone casually observing, the yard retained its outward normality. After burial, he tamped down the earth, restored the grass, and returned the immediate area to the appearance of undisturbed ground. From a distance, the crime would have remained invisible. Weeks passed without interruption, but the silence around Martha Freitag's absence grew heavier with each day. Her daughter attempted repeated phone calls, none of which were answered. Text messages went without response. Attempts to locate her through acquaintances provided no leads. The absence became noticeable not only to family members, but eventually to law enforcement, as concern escalated. When the official missing person report was filed, the investigation pivoted to a focused search for the last person known to reside with her. Detectives approached the property with systematic scrutiny. They examined the house for anomalies, checked for signs of forced entry, and observed the routines of those involved. David Callaghan offered initial statements, but subtle inconsistencies in his account drew attention. Investigators noted discrepancies between his explanations and physical evidence, gaps in his recollection, and unverified claims regarding her last movements. The inconsistencies alone were enough to warrant an intensified inspection of the property, particularly areas immediately surrounding the home. Forensic teams and officers scrutinized the backyard. Soil texture, subtle depressions, and irregularities in grass coverage indicated the possibility of disturbance. At that stage, trained investigators were able to detect differences invisible to untrained eyes. The examination of soil layers, the presence of uneven earth, and the detection of unnatural compaction led to a targeted excavation. On September 13, 2018, the search concluded with their recovery of human remains. The body was confirmed to be that of Martha Robin Freitag. The initial observation of a minor depression in the soil was the key that led to the grave's exposure. Forensic analysis established that the body had been placed in the ground immediately following the fatal incident in late July. The shallow grave itself provided minimal protection against discovery, yet it had delayed detection for weeks, allowing the suspect to maintain normal appearances. David Callaghan was arrested at the property following confirmation of the remains. He was charged with murder, abuse of a corpse, tampering with evidence, and domestic violence. The array of charges reflected the nature of the crime, the concealment, and the circumstances surrounding the act. Investigators interviewed him extensively, presenting the findings from the yard, forensic reports, and witness statements. Interrogation was methodical. Each piece of evidence was systematically outlined. The process relied not on coercion, but on the weight of accumulated facts, and the forensic certainty established by recovered remains. During questioning, officers highlighted the improbability of any narrative that would explain Martha Freitag's disappearance without implicating him. They described soil analysis, decomposition timelines, and the spatial evidence linking the burial site directly to the backyard under his control. They documented each deviation in his account. Confronted with the physical evidence, inconsistencies, and inability to produce an alternative explanation, Callaghan eventually acknowledged responsibility, entering a guilty plea in March 2019. The courtroom proceedings that followed focused on establishing both the chronological sequence of the homicide and deliberate steps taken to conceal the act. Witness testimony, forensic reports, and law enforcement summaries corroborated the details previously gathered. In May 2019, the sentence was delivered. Life imprisonment with parole eligibility after 18 years. The legal system formalized the consequences, linking each step of the crime to accountability. Even after conviction, the physical layout of the property remained unchanged above ground. But beneath the surface, the sequence of actions leading from argument to fatal assault to concealment and eventual discovery represented a complete timeline of calculated criminal behavior. The case stands as a procedural example of domestic homicide, forensic investigation, and criminal accountability. The fatal day began without indication of what was to come. By the afternoon, tensions between the two had escalated. The details of their exchanges are not fully recorded, but the confrontation intensified, with verbal conflict that transformed into physical aggression. The argument, as investigators later determined, became increasingly heated, fueled by immediate frustrations and long-standing disputes within the household. Faced with the weight of the evidence, Callaghan ultimately admitted responsibility and pled guilty, acknowledging the murder, the concealment, and the obstruction of justice. Court proceedings formalized the outcome. In May 2019, the sentence was delivered. Life imprisonment with parole eligibility after 18 years. The legal system ensured that the actions taken that summer were met with accountability, and the community received closure on a case that had lingered beneath the surface for weeks. Though the house and yard returned to normal appearances above ground, the reality of what occurred remained permanent. This case serves as a stark reminder that sometimes the most ordinary places hide the darkest truths, and that careful observation, persistence, and forensic investigation are essential to uncovering the full story. If you found this story interesting, make sure you stay connected with the channel. Cases like this reveal the layers behind each crime, the precision of investigative work, and the consequences that follow deliberate criminal acts. If you like this video, be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss the next true crime story we uncover.